Okay, we're looking at developing Pachabel's Canon in D into a reggae piece within GarageBand. So I've outlined a general breakdown of a piece to start with here, and I'll talk to you about how I've developed the ideas into being a bit more reggae. In this middle section, I've tried to make it sound a bit more dub, which is a developed version of reggae where effects are used such as delay. And then towards the end, I've tried to go for more of a dancehall feel, where instead of the chords being on 2 and 4, you've got syncopated chords starting on beat 1 of each bar. So I've used the instruments that I think would be most appropriate for reggae. So I've got the skanks, the chords on beats 2 and 4. I've created a drum beat that's got a kind of triplet syncopated idea on the hi-hat. I've used the clav sound to kind of sound a bit like a bass line idea. The main bass line comes in here on the muted bass, and then I've got this descending main motif on the organ, the bebop organ, and then a harmonized version coming in here. Okay, so then to bring in this organ, I've introduced this slide up. And now the bass comes in with a harmonized part on the organ. Now I've taken one of the main melody lines from the Pachabel Canon, but I've manipulated the rhythm a little bit so that it's a bit more syncopated and catchy in keeping with reggae. I've then harmonized it on the saxophone. Not all of these harmonies are quite right yet, but this is giving you a rough idea if I put it with the chords to how it sounds. Okay. Then for this next section, we go into the dubbed section. So what I've done to make this a bit clearer is I've labeled the parts that are dubbed. So instead of just using the normal roots kit, I've duplicated the roots kit here, but then I've opened up this section here, and I've played around mainly with delay. So it sounds like this, which is what you'd expect to hear in dub, which is often taking reggae backing tracks, reggae rhythms as they're known, and then heavily manipulated for live performance with vocals going over the top. And so on. I've also applied this same dubbed effect to the piano as well. So you'll hear that it's sounding, the tuning is manipulated through the tape delay on this. And this goes on for quite a long time. I've also done it to the trumpets as well, and because of the space left in here, you can really hear the delay coming in following these parts being introduced. So if you think about a lot of kind of pop and rock songs will often have a breakdown or a bridge section. I wanted to introduce a bit of contrast in this middle section. If the whole piece has the chords continuing on beats 2 and 4, the bass line, the melodies going with the drums, it will begin to start sounding a bit repetitive. So I wanted to introduce this as a way of creating a bit of contrast, so that when these ideas are brought back in, there's a kind of a renewed freshness to hearing them. Now, other things that I've introduced here is I've added an automation and I've faded in some of these tracks. So if you press A for automation when your piano typing keyboard is not on, you'll see on the bebop organ I've introduced the volume increasing throughout here. So this creeps back in like this. Now throughout this whole period I've got the bass continuing. A commonly used phrase in this type of music is bass culture. The bass is a very intrinsic part of keeping the music together and giving it its groove and giving it its energy. So I've had that bass continue to kind of gel and keep the whole piece cohesive like this. Then I've got this slide coming back on the organ and an alternative melody now starting on the trumpets and saxophone. Now I've gone for more of a bluesy sound for this. Not strictly reggae, but often a lot of these different musical styles will blend, and I thought adding in these blues notes gave it a different kind of idea. And then going back to the original harmonized idea from Pachabel's Canon here. This melody is not anything I've heard in Pachabel's Canon. This was just something I added in. If I had more time, I would have probably tried to look at the different melodic motifs within Pachabel's Canon and try and manipulate one of them. But I feel like I've got quite a few key components from the original Pachabel, so this is one of the few ideas that isn't taken directly and manipulated from the original. Okay, so now we go into this dancehall idea. Now I haven't really tried to make much dancehall before, but this is often a commonly used technique used within live reggae. They'll often go into a dancehall section within the piece to create a bit of contrast away from the 2 and 4, the chords on 2 and 4. So this is what it sounds like. Okay, so to create that, the chords, if you double click on the piano part, you'll see that the first chord, there's a chord on beat 1 and 3, but the second and fourth chord are slightly syncopated and ahead of beat 2. So we've got this. This effect. Now I've tried to create a bit of unison between the different parts, but to give it a bit more interest, what I've tried to do is almost kind of create a bit of a drum fill in between the parts. So the drums are playing this idea, but they're also then playing this kind of fill towards the end of each bar. And to give it a little bit more of a catchy feeling, I've also introduced this kind of octave idea on the clav, sounding like this. And then towards the end of the bar, this section, I've got this triplet fill leading back in to the main idea coming back. Now to do this, what I've done, if you double click on the Roots kit, starting here, you can see that you've got this velocity bar here. Now what I've tried to do is to try and create a bit more of a crescendo throughout this. So if you click on the first one, you'll be able to see the velocity. I've brought it down there really low, and each one, select it, I've brought it up slightly. A bit more, 51 there, 66, 79, 87, 105, and so on. So you can hear that you've got a crescendo. You could do that through using the automation like I showed you before. If you press A for automation, we could have just done a crescendo by double clicking and creating these dots, and the volume would then be increased by moving these dots up and down. But what I've tried to do is play around with the amount of power that's played through on the drums, and this makes it sound a bit more human. And then brings it back into the main idea again. Okay, now you can hear it starting to fade out. Now how I did the fade out is you'll see that I've got a master track down here. To get that open, you can't actually see that because it's not screen recording that part of the screen, but if you go up to the top and press track, you can then press show master track. It says hide master track because I am showing it at the moment. It's created the master track down here. Then on your main window, if you press A for automation, you can see what I've done is then just done a fade out on this track. The master track is basically controlling the volume of all these different tracks. So it's unlikely that you'd want to have one big crescendo in the middle of the piece, but if you wanted to, you could do that by creating some dots here and doing that, and everything on the whole piece would go louder. It wouldn't be very good to do that really. The only real use for doing this is to fade in or fade out. So you could do one at the start like this, and then that would have the same effect. So some pieces would have that, but I didn't really want that effect, as at the beginning of the piece I wanted to come in with a kind of fill. I'm not that happy with that drum fill at the start. I think we can make it sound more reggae. But this Roots kit is not the best kit to create that reggae sound, so I need to spend more time playing around with GarageBand, making sure all the sounds are downloaded and try and find some better sounds. So to create my drum, what I've done is, let's go back to the beginning. The kick is on C1. I've got a kind of a rim shot and a snare on beats 2 and 4, and then the hi-hat has got the triplet idea. If we extend that a bit longer. So it's important to have that kick drum and that snare on the beat so that that hi-hat idea can be a lot more syncopated. So it's finding that line between having the strong symmetrical and on the beat rhythms and the more catchy syncopated ideas to keep the piece cohesive and keep it together. So this is my overall draft to start with the fade out at the end. The current length is just under 3 minutes 15 seconds, and I've tried to experiment with introducing that contrast here with the dubbed ideas and here with the dancehall ideas.